Have you ever wondered why your heart feels heavier at night, as if the silence reveals what you tried to ignore all day? What if those restless thoughts, the sudden tears, the overwhelming weight weren't just emotions, but the voice of God whispering when everything else finally quiets down? And what if I told you that when the night falls, heaven leans in closer and God begins to speak in a language only the seeking heart can hear? That there is a sacred hour known to few when God pours mysteries into open souls and healing into wounded spirits. And if you're listening right now, it's not by chance. There is something in this message tonight that heaven specifically designed for you. There's a secret hidden in the darkness of the night. God speaks loudest in whispers, and those whispers are clearer when the world sleeps. There's a divine power moving while you rest, something invisible yet undeniable, and it's ready to reach into your life, to rearrange what's broken and stir what has long been still. But only a few truly understand this. Only those who seek Him in the stillness, in the sacred solitude of night. This isn't just another video. It's a divine invitation. Right now, you are standing at the edge of a spiritual encounter. What if tonight isn't just another night, but the night when everything changes? What if, in the next few minutes, your spirit receives exactly what it's been craving? An answer, a sign, a word from heaven. Tonight could be the turning point, and you're not here by accident. The Holy Spirit brought you here. This message will unlock deep truths from Scripture that have the power to touch your soul, calm your mind, and awaken your purpose. We will explore moments in the Bible when God met His people in the dark hours, when the world was quiet and hearts were finally still enough to hear. These stories are not just history. They are patterns of divine behavior, and once you understand how God moves at night, you'll start recognizing His voice in your own darkness. But be warned, some of the truths you'll hear tonight will challenge you. They will stir emotions, open memories, confront fears, but also restore, rebuild, and renew. Because the night isn't just for sleeping, it's for seeking. So pause what you are doing. Forget the distractions. This is sacred ground now. You've been crying out, and this is heaven's response. Listen until the end, because somewhere along this journey, perhaps even in the second to last teaching, lies a key that could unlock the blessing you've been praying for. Yes, that breakthrough, that healing, that sign. Before we begin, I want you to take a small yet powerful action of faith. Type in the comments, "Peace in Christ." Why? Because when you write those words, you're not just commenting, you're declaring, you're claiming peace over your night, over your mind, over your home. It's a way of saying, Lord, I choose to believe your presence is with me in this moment. And while you're here, click the like button, not for me, but for the thousands of others who need this message, but won't see it unless you act. Every like pushes this message to someone else's screen. Every like is a digital missionary act. You are helping spread the word of God to the broken, the tired, and the searching. And that is no small thing. If you haven't yet, subscribe to this channel, not because it helps numbers, but because many people use these videos as their only source of spiritual support. Some live far from a church. Others can't attend due to illness or fear. But when you subscribe, you become part of a community that surrounds them. And by staying connected, you keep your own flame burning. Don't be a visitor, be a vessel. Remember, the second to last message in this video may be the one that holds the exact key your soul has been searching for. Don't skip. Don't click away. God's timing is perfect, and tonight, He chose this video as the doorway. We are about to begin a journey that will take you through the scriptures like never before. You will walk through nights of sorrow and nights of revelation, moments of silence and moments of glory. But in each one, you will hear His voice, because as Isaiah 30:21 says, "Your ears shall hear a word behind you, saying, 'This is the way, walk in it.'" That word is coming tonight. So get comfortable. Open your heart. Keep your spirit alert. The study begins now. Have you ever looked at a situation in your life and thought, "This wall will never come down"? Maybe it's the wall of anxiety that keeps you up at night. Maybe it's the wall of heartbreak that you thought time would mend but hasn't. Or maybe it's the wall of silence from heaven, the one that makes you wonder if God still hears you. But what if I told you that the same God who brought down the walls of Jericho with nothing but obedience and praise is about to move in your life tonight? Jericho was not just a city, it was a stronghold. The Israelites were standing on the edge of their promise, but a massive wall stood between them and everything God had spoken. Maybe that's where you are right now. God has promised you peace, healing, restoration, a future. But something is blocking it. Something seems immovable. The story in Joshua 6 is not just about history, it's about strategy, divine strategy. God told Joshua, "See, I have given Jericho into your hands." Did you catch that? Have given, past tense. But the walls were still standing. What do you do when God speaks in the past tense about something you haven't seen yet? You obey. He told them to walk, just walk, once a day, for 6 days. On the 7th day, 7 times. Not with swords, not with battering rams, but with silence. And then with a shout of praise. There's power in obedience that makes no sense. Sometimes the miracle is on the other side of faith that looks foolish. Imagine being one of the Israelites walking around Jericho, people watching from the top of the walls, mocking, laughing, but still, they walked, they obeyed, they trusted the whisper of God more than the noise of men. And on the 7th day, when the priests blew the trumpets and the people shouted with all their strength, the walls didn't just crack, they collapsed completely. The walls fell because heaven responded to a sound. Not a sound of complaining, not of begging, but of praise. Your praise in the dark, your praise in the middle of pain, your praise in the silence. That's what shakes heaven. Now, I want you to think of your Jericho. What's the wall in your life right now? Is it fear? Is it a situation in your family? A battle in your mind? God is telling you tonight, I have already given you victory over it, but you must walk in faith, even when nothing seems to change, even when the wall looks untouched. Some of the most powerful moves of God begin with the smallest acts of obedience, and sometimes He asks us to be silent, not because he is absent, but because he's preparing a sound through you that will shift the spiritual atmosphere. Did you notice that before the shout, there were 6 days of silence? That's because God is often working in silence. You think he's not moving, but he's actually marching. And the moment you align your steps with his word, something begins to shift. Let me ask you, how many nights have you cried out, asking for breakthrough? How many prayers have you whispered in the dark, asking God to break down something you can't defeat on your own? This is your Jericho moment, not just a lesson, but a divine reminder. Walls fall when worship rises. Right now, heaven is not looking for the loudest person. It's looking for the most faithful. God doesn't need your strength. He needs your surrender. That's what made the walls fall. Not the army, not the weapons, but the obedience. Radical, unreasonable, bold obedience. And the beauty of the story is this: Jericho fell before a single sword was drawn. That's what God can do. He can cause things to collapse in your life without a fight, simply because you walked with him, trusted him, and shouted in praise when he said, "Now." But here's something deeper. The night before, the fall was the quietest. Many give up during that night. Many quit after the 6th day, one step away from the breakthrough. But you, beloved, are not one of them. You've made it this far. You're still watching. That means your 7th day is closer than ever. This block is not just a lesson. It's a spiritual decree. Your wall will fall. Stay with me as we continue deeper, because the next revelation will show you what to do when the wall falls, how to walk into the promise without fear, without retreat, and with full confidence that God finishes what he starts. But for now, remember this: if you continue this video to the end, Jesus will place a miracle in your life. Keep watching. There are nights when you feel forgotten, when the silence becomes so loud, it drowns out even your prayers. Have you ever laid down in exhaustion, not just physical, but spiritual, emotional, the kind that comes from wandering through life without direction or certainty? That's where Jacob was, fleeing from his past, uncertain of his future, alone under the open sky. But in that night, God appeared. Genesis 28 tells us that Jacob, running from the consequences of his deception, laid his head on a stone in a place called Luz. He had no idea that this seemingly random location would become the sacred ground of divine encounter. Isn't that just like God? To choose the most unexpected places and moments to reveal himself. Jacob falls asleep and heaven opens. He sees a ladder reaching from the earth to the heavens, with angels ascending and descending. And at the top stands the Lord himself, declaring, "I am the Lord, I am with you, and will watch over you wherever you go." This is no ordinary dream. It is a spiritual invasion into a weary heart. Jacob wasn't seeking a revelation. He was just trying to survive the night. And yet, God met him there. How many times have you settled your heart in places that felt barren, forgotten, or even cursed? You thought you were alone. You thought you were running, but God was waiting. And what if I told you that your lowest moment might be the exact place where heaven decides to break through? God didn't wait for Jacob to be clean, restored, or righteous. He met him while he was still wrestling with guilt, shame, and fear. That means God is not waiting for you to be perfect. He's waiting for you to be still. Jacob awoke with trembling, saying, "Surely the Lord is in this place, and I was not aware of it." What if that's you right now, watching this, maybe in your bedroom, your living room, maybe even in tears, and you don't even realize that God is in this moment? Sometimes we expect heaven to speak with thunder, but often it speaks in dreams, in quiet moments, in whispers just before we fall asleep. Jacob's stone pillow became a place of revelation. Your trial may become your testimony. There's something beautiful about the timing of this vision. It came at night, because some things can only be seen in the dark. Light can reveal, but darkness sharpens our spiritual senses. And while Jacob saw angels, the greater revelation was that heaven is not distant. God is not far. The ladder is proof. There is connection. That ladder in Jacob's dream wasn't just symbolic. In John 1:51, Jesus tells Nathanael that he is the ladder, the connection between heaven and earth. So, when Jacob saw the ladder, he was seeing a foreshadowing of Christ, the bridge between God and man. Now let's make this personal. You may feel stuck between who you used to be and who you're meant to be, between the past that haunts you and the future you haven't yet touched. But tonight, just as Jacob did, you can have a Bethel moment, a moment where the divine intersects your ordinary and transforms it forever. God told Jacob, "I am with you. I will not leave you until I have done what I have promised you." What promise are you holding on to? What dream has gone quiet inside your heart? Hear this. If God has spoken it, He will complete it. Not because you are worthy, but because He is faithful. But here's something deeper. Jacob renamed that place Bethel, which means house of God. He built an altar there. Why? Because encounters demand memorials. When God speaks, you must mark it. Tonight may be your Bethel moment, so mark it in your spirit. Don't forget what God is saying to you right now. And here's your invitation. Don't run from your pain. Lay down on it, even if it's a stone, because God can take that very stone and open heaven over your life. Jacob was transformed from a deceiver to a dreamer, from a fugitive to a man marked by God. And you too are not defined by your past. You are defined by the God who appears in your night and says, "I am with you." As we journey to the next revelation, ask yourself, what if this moment is your ladder? What if the next few minutes could open your spiritual eyes and realign your destiny? Stay with me, because what's coming next might answer a question you've been asking God for years. There are moments when your soul stirs in the darkness, a restlessness that can't be explained, a whisper you can't quite hear, but somehow you feel it. Could it be that God is calling you, even now? In 1 Samuel 3, we find a young boy named Samuel asleep in the temple of the Lord, where the Ark of God was. He was still learning the ways of the Lord, still unfamiliar with the voice of heaven, and yet it was to him, not the priests, not the elders, that God chose to speak in the middle of the night. The scriptures say something haunting. In those days, the word of the Lord was rare. There were not many visions. Does that sound familiar? How many people today feel like God has gone silent, that his voice is a distant memory, a fading echo from the past? Maybe you felt that too, like your prayers bounce back unanswered, like the heavens are shut. But what if I told you that the silence before the call is often the soil where God begins something new? Samuel was asleep when he heard it. Samuel, he thought it was Eli, the high priest. He ran to him, confused. Again the voice called, Samuel. And again he ran, until finally Eli realized it was the Lord calling the boy. Eli gave him a powerful instruction. If he calls you again, say, Speak, Lord, for your servant is listening. Those words would change Samuel's destiny, and they might change yours too. Because here's the truth. God still calls in the night, and sometimes the call doesn't come with thunder. It comes with stillness, a gentle stirring in your spirit, a sudden remembrance of his presence, a quiet invitation in the middle of your chaos. Think about this. Samuel had no idea that this was the beginning of a lifelong prophetic ministry. He didn't know that this voice would shape kings, guide nations, and leave a mark on history. All he had was a heart willing to listen. That's all God asks of you tonight. A heart that says, Speak, Lord. We often think we must be seasoned or holy enough to hear God clearly. But Samuel was a child, inexperienced, unaware, and that's exactly why God chose him. Because God doesn't require perfection. He desires availability. Now imagine, God speaks to you in the quiet hours, not because you've earned it, but because he delights in revealing himself to those who seek him with sincerity. You don't need to chase visions. You simply need to be still enough to hear the whisper. The message God gave Samuel was not easy. It was a word of judgment for Eli's household, a hard truth. But Samuel obeyed and delivered it, because when God speaks, it's not just to comfort, it's to commission. Some of you watching this video have been sensing something in your heart that you can't explain. A longing, a question, a quiet pull. Could it be that the Lord is calling your name? Not just to bless you, but to assign you. God is still in the business of calling people by name. Jesus said, My sheep hear my voice, and friend, if you belong to him, he is speaking to you. But the question is, will you recognize his voice? Samuel learned to recognize God's voice in the dark. You will too. Here's something powerful to reflect on. God could have waited until the daytime to speak, but he chose the night because there's something about the stillness of the dark that opens our ears more than the noise of the day. So if you've been going through a dark night of the soul, know this: he is closer than you think. The silence is not abandonment, it is preparation. And if you've ever prayed, God, speak to me, know that he hears you. And like Samuel, he is calling your name, not to overwhelm you, but to awaken you. Tonight, I want you to say it out loud. Even now, speak, Lord, for your servant is listening. Because once you open your heart to that voice, your life will never be the same. Stay with me. Because in the next part of this journey, we'll explore what happens when Jesus himself enters your night and breaks every storm with a single word. Have you ever felt like life is a storm, raging out of control? The waves keep crashing over you. The winds keep howling in your ears, and you can't seem to find a way out. It's as if the world is turning against you, and no matter how hard you try, you can't find peace. In Mark 4:35-41, we read the powerful story of Jesus calming a storm. This passage doesn't just describe a miraculous event, it speaks deeply to our hearts in times of trouble. The scene is set. Jesus and his disciples were crossing the Sea of Galilee. It was night. They were on a boat, and as they sailed, a great storm arose. The winds howled, the waves crashed, and the boat began to fill with water. The disciples were terrified. They thought they were going to drown. And what was Jesus doing? He was asleep. In the midst of chaos, Jesus was resting. It must have seemed unimaginable to the disciples. How could he sleep while they were about to perish? They woke him up, desperate, shouting, "Teacher, don't you care if we drown?" You see, their fear wasn't just about the storm. It was about the absence of control. When we face storms in our own lives, it's often not the external circumstances that disturb us most, but the feeling of being powerless. Like the disciples, we feel like we're sinking, and there's no way to stop it. But then, Jesus rises. With one simple command, he speaks to the storm, "Quiet, be still." And immediately, the wind dies down, and there is complete calm. The disciples were left in awe. They asked each other, "Who is this? Even the wind and the waves obey him." This moment reveals something profound about the nature of God. Jesus has authority over every storm in your life. He is not only Lord over creation, but also over the chaos that often invades your heart and your circumstances. When everything feels like it's spiraling out of control, he stands ready to speak peace into your situation. But let's pause and reflect for a moment. Why did Jesus allow the storm to rage in the first place? He was not unaware of the danger. He was not uncaring. But he allowed the storm to challenge the disciples' faith. He allowed them to experience fear and panic so that he could reveal a truth they would never forget. With Jesus, no storm lasts forever. He has the power to quiet the storm with a word, and even more, he wants to use these storms to deepen your trust in him. What does this mean for you tonight? It means that if you find yourself in the middle of a storm, whether in your health, your relationships, or your finances, Jesus is still in the boat with you. He might be asleep, but that doesn't mean he is absent. He is simply waiting for you to wake him up with a cry for help. Your faith in his power to deliver you is what unlocks his intervention. The disciples' fears turned to awe when they witnessed his power, and that awe led them to a deeper understanding of who Jesus was. Your storm, too, can become a catalyst for deeper intimacy with the Lord. Sometimes, the storm is what drives us to seek his peace. It's when we are at our lowest that we truly realize our need for him. And in that moment, he speaks, "Peace, be still." So I ask you today, what is the storm in your life? Are you willing to invite Jesus into it? Will you trust that he has the power to bring calm even in the most terrifying circumstances? Jesus' words are still powerful today. He is calling you to rest in his peace, even in the darkest hours of your life. The storm may not disappear immediately, but his presence brings peace that transcends all understanding. Let's reflect on this together. If you are in the middle of a storm, don't fear the waves. Jesus is the calm in the chaos. His peace is just one prayer away. And tonight, He is reaching out to you, asking you to trust Him. As we move forward, keep this in mind. Jesus is not just sleeping through your storm. He is watching, waiting, and ready to speak peace into your life. Stay with me, because in the next block, we will discover how the light of Christ can pierce through the deepest darkness and guide us to safety. Have you ever felt like you were walking in darkness, unsure of which way to go? The world can often feel like a dark place, full of confusion, fear, and despair. It's easy to lose hope when the path ahead is unclear. You may feel as though you are stumbling in the darkness, searching for a way out. But what if I told you that there is a light, a divine light, that has the power to illuminate your path and guide you safely through every trial? In John 8:12, Jesus makes a powerful declaration. I am the light of the world. Whoever follows me will never walk in darkness, but will have the light of life. This simple yet profound statement holds the key to our spiritual journey, especially when we find ourselves in those moments of uncertainty. Jesus is saying that He is the light that banishes the darkness. No matter how deep the night may seem, He is the beacon of hope that will guide you through. It's not just about physical light. It's about spiritual illumination. It's about knowing the truth and finding your way in a world that often feels lost. But why is this light so important? Because the darkness is more than just the absence of light. It's a force that confuses, deceives, and leads us astray. When we walk in darkness, we don't see things as they are. We stumble, we fall, and we lose our way. But when we walk in the light of Jesus, everything changes. Think of a time when you were uncertain or lost. Maybe it was a decision you had to make, or a season of life where you didn't know which way to turn. You might have felt overwhelmed, unsure, even desperate. It was in those moments that the light of Christ could have shone brightest if you let it. Walking in the light of Jesus means following His example, trusting His guidance, and believing that His word has the power to show you the way. It's about surrendering your own understanding and choosing to trust that His light will lead you to safety. But how does Jesus' light affect your everyday life? The light of Christ isn't just for your spiritual well-being. It affects your relationships, your decisions, and your overall outlook on life. It's a light that transforms. For example, when you face difficult situations, whether it's a financial crisis, a relationship struggle, or a health issue, the light of Jesus gives you clarity and peace. It's not just about knowing the answers. It's about feeling assured that no matter what you face, you are not walking alone. Jesus, the light of the world, is with you, guiding you through the darkness. There's something else we need to realize about this light. It's not just a light for us to enjoy. It's meant to shine through us. Jesus doesn't just want to illuminate our lives. He wants us to become bearers of His light, sharing His love, peace, and truth with the world around us. He calls us to be the light in the darkness, just as He is. Your life can reflect His light, and that reflection will guide others toward Him. If you are walking in the dark today, I urge you to stop and reflect on this truth. Jesus is your light. When the world feels overwhelming, when decisions seem impossible, when fear creeps in, Jesus stands as the light that overcomes all darkness, but the choice is yours. Will you follow him? Will you let his light illuminate your path? When we follow Jesus, we are no longer subject to the confusion of the world. His light brings clarity and direction. It brings peace and purpose. It's a light that transforms every aspect of our lives. So, as you continue to journey through this life, remember, Jesus is the light of the world. His light can never be overcome by darkness, and as you follow him, you will never walk in darkness again. The next block will explore a powerful truth about walking in the light. How the light of Christ empowers you to overcome every obstacle. Stay with me, because in the next teaching, we'll uncover how this divine light shines in your life in a way that no darkness can ever extinguish. Have you ever faced a storm in your life that seemed unrelenting? A storm so fierce that it caused you to question everything you once believed? When the night is darkest, when trials seem endless, it can feel as though faith is slipping through your fingers. But what if I told you that the most powerful faith is the one that holds firm during the darkest hours? In Mark 4:35-41, we find the disciples caught in a terrifying storm on the Sea of Galilee. The wind howled, the waves crashed over the boat, and fear gripped their hearts. The situation seemed hopeless, and they felt certain that they were going to perish. Yet, in the midst of the chaos, Jesus was sleeping in the boat. Do you ever feel like Jesus is silent during your storms? Like he's distant and not paying attention to the turmoil in your life? In those moments, it's hard to understand. But then, the disciples woke Jesus, asking, "Teacher, don't you care if we drown?" Jesus arose, and with a simple command, he rebuked the wind and the waves. "Quiet, be still." Immediately, the storm ceased, and there was great calm. Here's the question: why did the disciples struggle so much with fear when Jesus was right there in the boat with them? They had seen his miracles, his power, and his compassion. Yet, in that moment of fear, they forgot who was in the boat with them. This story speaks to the power of faith in the middle of the storm. The disciples were consumed by the fear of the storm, and their faith faltered. But Jesus showed them that faith in him has the power to calm any storm. He is greater than the forces of nature, greater than any problem, challenge, or fear you may face. Faith isn't about believing in the absence of storms. It's about trusting in God's power and his presence, even in the storm. Now, let's reflect on how this applies to your life. We all have storms, financial difficulties, health issues, relationship struggles, personal doubts, or even crises of faith. When the storms come, it's easy to lose sight of God's presence. We may even feel that he is asleep, distant, or uninterested in our suffering. But the truth is, he is with you in the storm. He sees your struggles, and he is waiting for you to call upon his name. The disciples learned that faith is not about the absence of problems. It's about believing that God is greater than anything you face. In your darkest night, faith doesn't require you to see the answer immediately, but it requires you to trust that God will respond. The storm may not always calm instantly, but Jesus is with you, and his presence brings peace. What would happen if, in the midst of your storm, you chose to hold on to faith instead of fear? What if, Instead of letting the storm control your thoughts and emotions, you allowed your faith in God to speak louder than your circumstances. When we place our trust in God, we can find peace even in the most turbulent situations. Jesus didn't promise us a life without storms, but he did promise that his peace would be with us through them. Faith is the anchor that keeps us steady in the storm. And just as the disciples witnessed, Jesus has the power to speak peace into your life. He can calm the storms in your heart, in your mind, and in your circumstances. Your faith may be tested, but through it, you will come to know a deeper, more powerful peace. As you continue watching this video, reflect on this. How does your faith in Christ look when the storm is raging? Will you choose to place your trust in Him, knowing that He has the power to calm the waves and bring peace to your soul? In the next block, we will explore the role of trust and surrender in deepening your faith. Trusting God in the storm is one of the most transformative steps you can take on your journey. Stay with me as we uncover the truth of how surrender can lead to peace. In the midst of life's trials, there's often a question that arises. How do we truly trust God when everything feels uncertain? The storms come, be it financial hardship, health struggles, or relational tensions, and it seems as though we're being swept away. But what if the key to finding peace lies in surrender? The Bible speaks of surrender in many forms, but one of the clearest teachings comes from Proverbs 3:5-6, which says, "Trust in the Lord with all your heart, and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways submit to Him, and He will make your paths straight." At the heart of surrender is trust. It's about relinquishing control, acknowledging that God's plans are higher and greater than ours. But how do we surrender when it feels like everything around us is unraveling? How do we trust God when the storm seems unrelenting and we can't see the way out? Let's take a moment to consider the life of Abraham. In Genesis 22, God asked Abraham to do something unthinkable, to offer his only son, Isaac, as a sacrifice. The story seems incomprehensible, doesn't it? Abraham had waited for years for a son, and now God was asking him to give up that very promise. Imagine what Abraham must have felt. His heart must have been torn, the weight of the command pressing heavily on his soul. Yet, Abraham chose to trust and surrender. He didn't try to understand everything. He simply obeyed. On the way to the mountain, Isaac asked his father, "Where is the lamb for the burnt offering?" And Abraham, with unwavering faith, replied, "God Himself will provide the lamb for the burnt offering, my son." Abraham knew that no matter how dire the situation seemed, God's provision would come. His trust was not in what he could see, but in God's promises. This story isn't just about obedience. It's about surrendering your understanding and trusting God's perfect plan, even when you don't know how it will work out. Abraham trusted that God would provide, even in the face of the impossible. And just as God provided a ram in place of Isaac, God will provide for you in your darkest hour. Now, what about you? Are you holding on to control in the storm? Or are you surrendering to God, trusting that He is in control? The storm may not always cease immediately, but in surrender, we find peace. Trust isn't about waiting for the storm to pass. It's about trusting that God is with you in the storm, guiding you through it. In the story of the disciples in the storm, they woke Jesus, seeking answers, but in that moment, their faith wasn't complete. Jesus asked them, "Why are you so afraid? Do you still have no faith?" Mark 4:40. The disciples were leaning on their own understanding and looking to their circumstances rather than trusting in the one who had the power to calm the storm. Jesus wasn't condemning their fear. He was inviting them to a deeper trust. Trust isn't the absence of fear. It's the choice to trust in God's goodness despite the fear. When we surrender our worries, our plans, and our understanding to Him, we invite God's peace to fill our hearts, even in the midst of chaos. When we surrender, we make space for God to work. It's in surrender that we experience His grace, His guidance, and His provision. Just as He provided for Abraham and calmed the storm for His disciples, He will provide for you. So, what does it mean to surrender in your life today? It's not just about letting go of control, but about trusting that God's plan is far greater than anything you can imagine. It's about saying, "God, I don't understand it all, but I trust that you will lead me through this." As we move forward in this study, remember this: surrender isn't a one-time decision. It's a daily choice to trust God with everything you have. It's not easy, but the rewards are eternal peace and a deeper, more intimate relationship with God. The next block will explore how God's faithfulness is evident even when we don't see the answers right away. Stay with me, because the truth you're about to discover can change the way you experience God's provision in your life. What do you do when you're waiting for God to answer your prayers, but it feels like He's silent? Many of us have been there, praying, hoping, and yearning for answers. Yet it seems as if God is not speaking, not acting, or not moving in the way we expect. The waiting can feel like a test of faith. But what if, in this waiting, God is doing something even greater than what we can see? In Isaiah 40:31, we find a powerful promise. "But those who hope in the Lord will renew their strength. They will soar on wings like eagles. They will run and not grow weary. They will walk and not be faint." This passage speaks of the strength that comes from waiting on God. It's not about sitting idly by, but about trusting that God is working behind the scenes, even when we don't see the results immediately. The strength that comes from waiting isn't just about enduring hardship. It's about soaring above our circumstances with hope and faith that God is faithful to His promises. Let's look at the story of Hannah, a woman who waited for many years for the one thing she longed for, a child. In 1 Samuel 1, we read of her deep distress and prayers, pouring out her heart before the Lord. She cried out for a son. And yet, God's response didn't come immediately. In fact, she had to wait for years before she finally gave birth to Samuel. But in her waiting, she learned something profound. God's timing is perfect. Hannah's story shows us that God's silence isn't abandonment. It's an invitation to grow deeper in our trust and to learn to rely on His timing. When God is silent, it doesn't mean He's not working. On the contrary, He's preparing us for what's ahead, and in the process, He's shaping our hearts, our faith, and our perseverance. This is a lesson we can all learn from. Faith doesn't thrive in the absence of waiting, but in the midst of it. It's in the waiting that our trust in God's faithfulness is tested. And it's in that testing that our faith becomes stronger. God's faithfulness doesn't depend on how quickly He answers us. It depends on His nature. He is always faithful, even when the answers don't come in our preferred time. Have you ever wondered why God allows waiting? It's in the waiting that we often experience a deeper understanding of God's goodness. It's in the waiting that we learn to trust Him, not just for what He does, but for who He is. Waiting isn't a punishment. It's a process of refinement. Consider the story of Joseph in the book of Genesis. Joseph had a dream as a young man where his brothers would one day bow down to him. But the road to seeing that dream fulfilled was long and difficult. He was sold into slavery, wrongfully imprisoned, and left in dire circumstances for years. Yet, in all that time, Joseph never lost faith in God's ability to fulfill His promise. Joseph didn't know the details of God's plan, but he trusted that God would be faithful. And when God's timing was perfect, Joseph was elevated to a position of great power, just as God had shown him in his dream. Joseph's story reveals that sometimes we have to go through the waiting season before we can see the fulfillment of God's promises. Just like Joseph, you may be in a waiting season right now. Maybe it feels like you're in a pit, like your prayers aren't being heard, or like the promises God gave you are far from being fulfilled. But take heart, God is always faithful to keep His promises. His silence is not abandonment, it's preparation. Psalm 27-14 encourages us, wait for the Lord, be strong and take heart and wait for the Lord. This verse reminds us that waiting on God isn't passive, it's active faith. It requires strength, perseverance, and a heart that continues to trust, even when we don't understand. In the waiting, God is refining you. He's teaching you patience, trust, and dependence on Him. And just as Isaiah 40:31 promises, when we wait on God, He will renew our strength. We won't grow weary because we are trusting in His perfect timing. So, if you're in a season of waiting, don't despair. God is faithful, and His promises will be fulfilled in your life. The waiting will not last forever. Just as He answered Hannah, Joseph, and so many others in His perfect time, He will answer you. The key to thriving in the waiting is to trust in God's goodness and His perfect timing. Trust that He knows what's best for you, and that in His silence, He's preparing something beautiful for you. Now, as we move on to the next block, we'll explore how God uses trials to mold our character. The waiting and the silence often serve a greater purpose that we may not see immediately. Stay with me. The next teaching could be the key to understanding God's purpose in your waiting. Have you ever wondered why, despite being a believer, life seems to be filled with hardships? Why does God allow us to go through struggles, heartaches, and even seemingly endless trials? It is a question many of us wrestle with, especially when we feel the weight of life's burdens pressing heavily on our hearts. But what if these trials were not just obstacles, but opportunities? What if the very things that challenge us the most are the ones that refine us? In 1 Peter 1:6-7, we find a powerful truth about the role of trials in our lives. In all this, you greatly rejoice, though now for a little while, you may have had to suffer grief in all kinds of trials. These have come so that the proven genuineness of your faith, of greater worth than gold, which perishes even though refined by fire, may result in praise, glory, and honor when Jesus Christ is revealed. This passage reveals a profound concept. Trials are like fire. They come to refine us, to purify our faith, and to prepare us for something greater. Just like gold is refined in the fire, our faith is purified through the heat of life's challenges. It's through these trials that our true character emerges, revealing a faith that is unshakable and true. Let's take a moment to consider the life of Job. Job's story is one of the most profound examples of suffering in the Bible. He lost everything: his wealth, his health, and even his children. Yet, in the midst of this overwhelming grief, Job did not curse God. Instead, he declared in Job 23:10, "But he knows the way that I take. When he has tested me, I will come forth as gold." Job understood that his trials were not random or pointless. He knew that God was using the fire of his suffering to refine his faith. He believed that even though he couldn't see it, God had a purpose in his pain. And in the end, when Job's trial was over, his faith was stronger, and he was restored with more than he had lost. This is the same principle that applies to you today. God doesn't waste suffering. Every trial, every heartache, and every moment of pain has a purpose. God allows these challenges to shape you, mold you, and refine your character. It is in these moments that we learn to trust God in deeper ways, knowing that He is with us, even in our darkest hours. Think about Paul and his experience with a thorn in the flesh. In 2 Corinthians 12, 7-10, Paul speaks of a persistent affliction that he pleaded with God to remove. But God's response was not what Paul expected. Instead of removing the thorn, God said, "My grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness." Paul's response to this was remarkable. "Therefore I will boast all the more gladly of my weaknesses, so that the power of Christ may rest upon me." Paul understood that his weaknesses were opportunities for God's power to be displayed. His trials were not a sign of God's abandonment, but a chance for God's strength to be made perfect in His weakness. In our trials, God doesn't just help us endure. He uses them to reveal His power in us. But why do we need these trials? Why can't God just bless us with peace and comfort all the time? The answer lies in the refining power of trials. Without trials, we would never experience the depth of God's grace. Without suffering, we would never understand the sufficiency of His strength. And without pain, we would never know the sweetness of His healing touch. Think about the refining process of gold. When gold is placed in fire, impurities are burned away, leaving only the pure gold behind. This is exactly what God is doing in your life. He allows trials to burn away the impurities, the doubts, the fears, the selfishness, the pride, so that what remains is a stronger, purer faith, a faith that is not easily shaken, a faith that trusts God even when everything else around us is falling apart. This process of refinement is not easy. It's painful. It's difficult. But in the end, it brings forth something more precious than gold, a faith that glorifies God and points others to His goodness and grace. Just as gold is valuable because of its purity, so is your faith valuable because of the trials it has endured and the way it has been refined. So, when you face trials, remember that God is with you in the fire. He is refining your faith, making it stronger, and preparing you for what's ahead. You are not alone in your suffering. He is using your pain to build something beautiful in you, a faith that shines brightly even in the darkest moments. As we move on to the final block, let me leave you with this thought. The trials you face today are preparing you for the blessings of tomorrow. What you are going through right now is not in vain. God is refining you for something greater. Now, in the next block, we'll look at the promise of restoration and how God brings healing after the storm. Stay tuned, because the final part of this study will bring you great hope for what is to come. You've walked through the darkness, faced the fire of trials, and endured the pain that life sometimes brings. But now, after everything you've been through, there is something profound that God wants you to understand. Restoration is coming. God is not a God who leaves his children in the valley. He is a God who promises to restore what was lost, to heal what was broken, and to bring beauty out of ashes. Let's revisit the words of the prophet Joel in Joel 2:25-26. I will restore to you the years that the locust has eaten, the swarming locust, the young locust, and the devouring locust, my great army which I sent among you. You shall eat in plenty and be satisfied, and praise the name of the Lord your God, who has dealt wondrously with you. And my people shall never again be put to shame. These words are not just promises made to the people of Israel. They are promises made to you. God is saying to you right now, I will restore what the enemy has stolen. The years you feel you've lost, the opportunities that seem gone, the dreams that seem shattered, God is going to restore them. It's important to realize that restoration doesn't always come in the way we expect. Sometimes, restoration isn't just about returning things to the way they were. Sometimes, it's about God giving us something even better. Just like Job, who received double for his troubles, sometimes God's restoration is far greater than what we lost. When God restores, He doesn't just give back what was lost, He makes it better. In Psalm 51:12, David prayed, Restore to me the joy of your salvation, and uphold me with a willing spirit. David was asking God to restore the joy that had been lost through his own sin and the consequences that followed. But notice something powerful. David didn't just ask for his joy back. He asked for a new joy, the joy of salvation. When God restores, He doesn't just bring back what you had. He brings you to a deeper, fuller experience of His grace and goodness. So many people struggle with the idea of restoration because they think it's too late for them. They think that the years they've wasted, the mistakes they've made, or the hurt they've endured has disqualified them from experiencing God's restoration. But here's the truth. God specializes in restoration. The same God who parted the Red Sea, healed the sick, and raised the dead is the same God who will restore you. There is no life, no situation, no person that is too far gone for God's restoring power. In Isaiah 61:3, the prophet declares, to bestow on them a crown of beauty instead of ashes, the oil of joy instead of mourning, and a garment of praise instead of a spirit of despair. This is what God does for His people. He exchanges our ashes for beauty, our mourning for joy, and our despair for praise. He takes the very things that weigh us down and transforms them into something glorious. Your pain is not the end of your story. It is the beginning of your restoration. We must remember, though, that restoration is not always immediate. There may be times when we don't see the change right away. But in the meantime, God is working behind the scenes. He is tending to the soil of our hearts, preparing us for the fullness of His blessing. And just as a seed needs time to grow before it bears fruit, so too does our restoration. Patience and faith are required as we trust God in the waiting. But when that restoration comes, oh, how sweet it will be. You will look back on your journey and see how far you've come, how much God has done, and how His faithfulness has never failed you. God's restoration is also a promise for the brokenhearted. If you've lost hope, if you've experienced deep emotional or spiritual wounds, God's healing is not just about fixing things. It's about bringing you back to wholeness. He will heal your heart, restore your joy, and give you the peace that passes all understanding. Now, imagine how different your life could look once you embrace the truth of God's restoration. Maybe you've been feeling as though everything is falling apart, but in reality, God is setting the stage for a magnificent restoration. He's making a way where there seems to be no way. He's turning your tears into joy, your mourning into dancing, and your struggles into testimonies of His greatness. As we come to the end of this video, I want you to hold on to one thing. God has not forgotten you. The trials you've faced, the pain you've endured, and the losses you've suffered have not gone unnoticed. God sees every tear, every struggle, every heartache, and in His perfect time, He will restore all that has been lost. So, as you go on with your day, remember this: God is working in your life. Restoration is not a distant hope. It is a promise that is being fulfilled even now. Hold on to your faith. Keep trusting and watch as God brings forth His glory in your life. If you have been encouraged by this message, I want to encourage you to take action right now. Comment "Restoration in Christ" below to let me know that you're believing for the restoration that God has promised you. And if you haven't already, make sure to like and subscribe to this channel. Your engagement helps spread this powerful message to others who need to hear it. Remember, you are part of this community, and together we will see God's work unfold in each of our lives. Stay connected with us. Keep the flame of faith burning, and let God continue to move in your life. And now, as we close, take a moment to sit quietly and reflect on all that God is doing. Let His peace fill your heart and thank Him for the restoration that is already in the process. Don't pause the video just yet. Take these final moments to allow the peace of the Lord to surround you. Trust that the best is yet to come. God bless you, and I will see you in the next study.